Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me here in his Buckeyes gear, it looks like, national championship stuff. Did you wait for that to come in? Oh, on Mr. Brian E. Roach.
Did I wait? What do you mean, did I wait for it to come in? Yeah, I had to wait. It was back-ordered.
I had no idea. You know what? I'm not the biggest. This may surprise you. As much as, I love to buy, gear. Anything you could put, a Steelers logo on. By the way, Foco has, this fanny pack now for the Stanley Cups. I just posted that on social media not too long ago, and I'm just that's pretty ridiculous. I mean, I do have a limit, but if you're into, I don't have a Stanley, so it doesn't matter. But I don't usually buy the gear that has the year on it. I don't know. I do have one from the first college football playoff win. I have some from some other sports. I had a 2017 Stanley Cup Penguins shirt or whatever, but now it's I'm not gonna wear a 2017. I know the kids do, but I've worn this significantly since 2017, and it's probably not even good enough to shove off to the thrift stores as a donation.
I will wear the national championship hats. I have one from every year since that first playoff. Well, I have them. So, and I will wear them. I interchange them. But I admit, my favorite Buckeye hat is the one that says best damn team in the land and just has the block O. That's it.
That's pretty cool. I actually have one my uncle purchased for me. My uncle that's the Cleveland Browns fan. So at least we come eye to eye on one of our teams that we follow. And it said one at first, which was kind of cool, but it would be nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I still have the Steelers Super Bowl 40 hat. That was the Seahawk kind of color, whatever, or was that the 43 hat? Might have been it was the 43 hat, I think. But I don't wear it, you know what I mean? I thought about busting it out even for this show, and I'm just this thing looks it's pretty dated or whatever. In fact, the one I got on today was the draft hat that Pickett wore when he got drafted, and I was they really went retro with this design. But speaking of which, we are gonna we're arriving here at a topic that we've been trying to talk about for, several weeks. So
yep.
Finally, we're here. I wanted to pull up the NFL's important dates because I want to get this right. I was right. The old mind is working today. I may have had enough coffee for once, and there's a reason for that. I got up earlier and had more coffee than usual. So I'm energetic. March 10th is the legal tampering period right around the corner here. I mean, March 1st is this weekend. So we're just about 2 weeks away from legitimate free agent talks. When you see something like Adam Schefter says, so-and-so, at noon, the floodgates will open. You'll be like, wait a minute, if the legal tampering period just started, you start doing the Pacific Rim thing with Charlie, what's his name, with everything, almost like a crime board with all the yarn and the lines attached. And you're like, how? It's 12:01. They just started tampering, and a guy goes, yes, I'll accept that deal. We all know it's
because
bullshit.
Tampering is occurring even as we speak.
Right now at the NFL
right
Combine.
Now, this is the illegal tampering period that's happening now. The tampering is occurring. It's just not legal.
Yes, it is. Everybody's hey, speaking of, I'll grab a cup of coffee. Everybody's going around, and they're like, yeah, let's have a cup of coffee together. What do you think these GMs are talking about? If John Lynch and Omar Khan are sitting down, probably talking about Deebo Samuel, right? But they're not technically allowed to talk about Deebo Samuel. And then somebody will talk to somebody, and a janitor will walk by Omar Khan's office, and the janitor will text his buddy who happens to be a friend of one of these maybe people, social media influencers, and then the word gets out. So, but don't buy anything until at least March 10th. Don't buy it officially till the league year starts, 4 p.m. New York Eastern Time, March 12th. But before then, they are at the Combine. Omar Khan, 2 different interviews. He did the one in front of everybody at the big presser in Indianapolis, and then he sat down with Rob King with Steelers.com. Rob King, the new play-by-play guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers radio. And they a lot of overlap with the 2 conversations, but basically I want to cover the couple of offensive queries. Number 1, quarterback. And he says, we'd like to have both guys back. Obviously, he's not going to say anything differently. Pro Football Talk says the Steelers are like one of 6 teams interested in Matt Stafford. There's a lot of people that think he has a lot left in the tank, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about that at a later date. We talked about some of that on the previous episode, so go check that out, folks, if you haven't already, and like, comment, subscribe. So that was one of them. The other one, running backs, Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris. Oh, we've talked with their agents. We've had some talks. Okay. That's where it is right now. You know what I mean? And then George Pickens, we'd like to extend him. George would like to be a great Steeler and would like to stay here. And that's what it about. He said something about offensive line too. I think his priority. He said I think he said something like since he's been here. And I'm like, well, I think he means in his spot as general manager because he's been with the Steelers for a very long time. Been for a long time and been with the scouting and. That's why you're not going to get one over on Omar Khan. But he does say, those 5 guys have been a priority of his since taking over the GM role. But we have defensive stuff to talk about. There's not a whole lot of meat left on the bone, but he did talk about some stuff. And I want to jump straight into the linebackers, specifically the inside linebackers, because there's going to be some movement here for a variety of reasons. Obviously, this time last year, we were really wondering Steelers still needed to do something with this group, right? Cole Holcomb finished the season on IR. Quan Alexander, Holcomb was the big piece the year before that was signed in free agency, was doing very well, got hurt. Quan Alexander then had to play more time. He was under a 1 year, got hurt, did not come back last year. Holcomb did not play last year, but in these interviews, Khan says if we needed him, he would have been available to play in the playoffs. And I was scratching my head like, well, they did play one playoff game, but he kind of repeated himself with that. He said the same thing about Roman Wilson, etc. So Holcomb's going to be of debate because he's got a pretty high cap number here. The Steelers signed Patrick Queen last year to a 3-year deal, very handsome deal, high-paying deal. He was the prize of free agency for Omar Khan. Kind of came out of left field. We were not expecting that, right? But Holcomb, let me see. I had Holcomb's numbers here. I thought it was like an $8 million cap hit. I'm not sure how much dead money and savings. Okay, so it's a savings of $6 million. He's at $7.6 million final year of his deal. It's not like Omar, just from that kind of cursory talk, was not like, you're not going to say you're just going to dump or can the guy, but this is about the time right now where you start to see those moves. I mean, somebody like a Mitchell Trubisky last year, they knew they weren't going to hold on to. Presley Harvin, Mason Cole, players in areas where they were going to upgrade and they knew that they weren't holding on to these guys. These guys weren't the future. They were let go immediately. It was around Valentine's Day, which sucks, for those guys if they're trying to celebrate anything.
So sad. Haha.
Yeah, it's like getting let go around any holiday, isn't? But Hallmark holiday, come on, man, show us the love. They weren't showing any love. We haven't seen a lot of those moves right now yet, Brian. So I wonder, to save $6 million on a 29-year-old, give or take days ahead or behind, 29-year-old linebacker who did not play at all last year, when you have Patrick Queen for the next 2 years and you drafted Peyton Wilson, what do you do with Cole Holcomb?
It depends on what you think of Peyton Wilson, right? And they have had injury issues in their linebacker core consistently. Just have. You sadly, you think Landon Roberts probably drops out of that group. I think he's off his deal anyway.
Yes. So he was next on the list.
Agent. Yeah. So you got to have some depth. The question is, I kind of like the sound of a pairing of Queen and Holcomb, and then having, Wilson there as the third guy. The difference being, it's just a different mentality. I don't know what they're going to do there. If they're really in love with Peyton Wilson and they like what they saw last year and they think he can take that next step in second year, maybe they decide to say, hey, look, you didn't do anything for us last year, and we got a guy to do stuff for us this year, and they make that change. And maybe that allows them to choose to keep Landon Roberts somehow on a deal, so that they have that run stuffer, that bruiser kind of back that wouldn't be one of those other three, right? So it's optional.
Yeah, and I mean, a guy that's 29, 30, I more or less look at the injury history with his knees. Landon Roberts is 30, but he's not like a 3-down backer. I have two legit 3-down backers in this league, guys who have been captains with their other teams, guys that have called the plays as a defensive quarterback. That's huge. And I mean, they had it and it slipped away when you're talking about Holcomb and Alexander the previous year. I think something that we glossed over this. It was actually announced last week, and we skipped over it. But in talking with the linebackers and the group, Scott McCurley, 18 years of experience, hired over previous 5 years with the Dallas Cowboys, of which they've had some dudes like, that at the beginning of his tenure, maybe the tail end of a career, but like Sean Lee, you've had Leighton Vander Esch. Micah Parsons was supposed to be an inside linebacker. And I mean, I believe he was overall outside linebackers, but Dallas is playing a 4-3 anyway. So Parsons, he has a track record with. Was coaching maybe an issue with some of the things we're complaining about? It obviously was prior to Curry coming, and now Curry's gone. Just a cup of coffee here in the Steel City. So maybe this is a change that we're not looking into deep enough that may have more of an impact than we might know.
It's possible. I mean, I don't dislike the hiring. It's a quiet hiring again, but it could outweigh its impact, right? Its impact could outweigh the noise that gets made around it if he can really, get this linebacker group to be more in sync than they have been in years past.
Yeah, I'm with you. Just anything that goes on the sideline there, even if it's just communication, because we kept saying that communication had been a major, pain in the ass.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just all the way across the board. And it just seems like it almost seems like recurring themes, unfortunately, for the Steelers, trying to still fix inside linebackers since Ryan Shazier went down years ago. They've tried everything. They drafted a number 1. I mean, this is for the Steelers 3-4. This is their defensive quarterback, right? This is the guy that they need. It's just that it's probably their most important position other than quarterback on the offensive side of the field. I'm not going to say the Queen was a bust in any way. I don't think Queen had a terrible year by any means, but I think when you make that high profile of a signing and a guy that was a former first round pick and he was like an all-pro or second-team all-pro, then you expect just a little bit more. I don't know what that little bit more is. It's going to be a tackling machine, but you also don't expect Derrick Henry to just coast over you as though Devin Bush were still there. He's one of many that the Steelers have brought in to try and shore up that position over the years, and it didn't work out. So, could they still add more? Obviously, if they got rid of Holcomb, maybe. Would they bring Roberts back? I don't know what kind of market Roberts has, but the reality for Roberts is if they feel Holcomb has anything left in the tank, and again, losing just that $6 million, that's not a whole lot for a starter in that position.
No, not a bunch.
And you kick the tires on him for another year. You still have Wilson waiting in the wings if Holcomb can't play. That's not terrible. But Roberts is now looking at himself as being probably relegated to mostly special teams and sub packages. He's not going to be used as frequently. He might just kind of say he's still 30. He could go somewhere else and play, So I don't necessarily know that he's a shoe-in to come back. It's gonna be based on the opportunity that's available to him. And obviously Wilson was drafted to play. He's the future in that spot. So that doesn't bode well for Roberts anyway. So outside linebackers, I think they're pretty set here. Aside from, you always want more depth. TJ Watt's entering his final year of his contract. Omar Khan goes out. He discusses in his interviews and says, of course, we want TJ back. Who wouldn't want TJ back, right? We're going to sign TJ Watt for, we're going to try and extend him, etc. So you have Alex Highsmith, to me, is another guy. Now, Highsmith, I think, is treading on some. He's not anywhere where I'm like, let's get rid of this guy or he sucks. But he had down here, 6.5 sacks, I believe. It's not consummate with what he's paid to do, and he is very handsomely paid. He is signed through 2027. Now, for 2025, the dead money here, he's got a cap number of 18.6. His dead money 16.8. He ain't going nowhere. The following 2 seasons, the cap savings is around $9 million and then 15.5 as his number increases a little bit to 20 and 21 million. This is a make or break year for Alex Highsmith for the reason I'm going to say next. Nick Herbig, who's going to enter year 3 and next year enters year 4 and is shown, what do you want to say, more of a prowess to getting after the quarterback. If Nick could show that he could stop the run and set the edge a little better, we're going to be talking about this in another year, but I think overall this group, you might add one more veteran, so you have like a fourth option in case somebody gets dinged, like what happened throughout the year. Even Herbert getting dinged, and then Highsmith getting dinged. It won't be Preston Smith. He was released, so
yes,
and
it won't be Preston Smith.
Yeah, he was expensive to bring back. He had a huge cap hit. Steelers not looking to bring him back on. What was it, 12? Well, his average per year was 12.5 million. I'm not sure if that was his actual cap number, but it was pretty big. And he's 33, so he's up there. That's the reason why the Packers moved on. We haven't looked at this yet, Brian, but we will rate as, the thick of this comes like next week. We're going to look at maybe the free agents that are available out there. I hadn't really looked at edge rusher, but you could expect probably another 30-something kind of guy coming into the mix maybe if they do add a fourth body.
There's another there's always another option. Depending on how things fall in the draft, don't be surprised if somewhere they look to bolster that and keep that core a little younger. TJ is getting older. I don't want to say he's old yet, but in football years, but he's getting older. He is definitely not on the ascent of his career, but on the descent of the downside of his career. He's got fewer years ahead of him than he did behind him, basically, as far as football life goes. So it won't surprise me if they start looking to add that depth, not as veteran guys, but as young guys.
Yeah, that could be possible. Speaking of overall with linebackers, we're starting to see interviews around the league, who the Steelers have talked to, who they talked to. Cody Simon, Ohio State. So we've got your gear on. We're talking Ohio State.
There's a reason that I'm wearing this gear for this podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's the combine, and because in my mock drafts, it's nearly a full sweep of Ohio State players lately.
Well, that's your fantasy drafts too. Well, it's Steelers.
It is.
Yeah, it's Brian. Brian shows no limit of bias for when it comes to Ohio State or the Pittsburgh Steelers, either way.
None.
Either direction, yeah. I feel, for the most part, I feel good about linebacker. So it's not something, if they want to add somebody like a Cody Simon somewhere in the draft, and then that's what they do. I was trying to look here on the list by position. Tyler Matakevich will be a free agent too, but mainly a special teamer. Yep. We already mentioned Landon Roberts. I think that kind of covers all of the linebackers. We look at the secondary. 1 year ago, we had a conversation about need somebody else opposite Joey Porter Jr. Need to find a slot corner. Need to find somebody else that goes and pairs well with Minkah Fitzpatrick. Keanu Neal, speaking of which, was one of those guys they tried out, officially retiring from the NFL this week too, so happy trails to him. Just a multitude of injuries that derailed him over the seasons of a bright career when he started with the Falcons, but that didn't work out. But the Steelers did. This is a low-profile one, too. It shouldn't have been because it was day one, but because, Patrick Queen, there was a trade that ends up happening either that day or the next day with Deontay Johnson. But Deshaun Elliott. And Deshaun Elliott, I feel, he just feels like a Steeler. He just feels like a guy that belongs on this roster, that plays well, that's a locker room leader that they've needed.
Ryan Clark-ish.
Yes, I would agree with that. And obviously, you've got Minkah. Minkah ain't going nowhere.
He's not, but let's be fair. And here's the problem. Minkah hasn't been Minkah for at least 3 years, right? He has not been the kind of impact player that we saw in year one of his tenure here, and to a certain extent year two. He just hasn't been. Now, whether that's because of how they've had to play, whether that's because of the backfields coach, whether that's because of the defensive coordinator, what the reason is, I don't know. But I think if Minkah has the kind of season he's been having this upcoming season, because I agree he's not going anywhere, right? Nor am I advocating for Minkah to leave, because I'm definitely not. But if this season is of the same ilk as the last few, then it's a different story next year.
Yeah, and you've got Gerald Alexander still here as the defensive backs coach, but they've added an assistant secondary coach with Anthony Midget. So, You look at the staff and you're just like, okay, they're adding more guys to the secondary. Because when Terrell Austin that was one thing I felt Terrell Austin was really good at. Cardinal Lake was here, kind of so. And then Grady, what's his name, that moved on. And, so type stuff. But you're right. I mean, even the sacks and everything else was down. There was a lot of inconsistency, but we still get the same two problems this year. Last year, it was a trade, Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson, who is now a free agent. He only had a year left from his contract carried over from Carolina. Effective, I'd say good, not great. At times, average.
Better than what we had before. That's what I'll say.
Okay,
doesn't mean it's the right fit. Doesn't mean it's where you should stop. I don't know what Dante Jackson's market's going to be. I don't know what his market's going to be, because he was serviceable, more so than the play we had at that position years before. We'll have to see what else they do. If they're going to make a splash on the defensive side in free agency, won't surprise me if it's a corner.
Yeah, and there was C.J. Henderson, who never got to play at all this year, a veteran. And then Omar Khan mentions Corey Trice, and Corey's problem being that health. He had been healthy to be available in a guy who was a 7th-round pick because of health questions coming out of the draft. Be that answer, be that 17-game long-term answer, and that is questionable. I know somebody's gonna jump into comments and be like, well, "You don't have to worry about Jackson. You got Trice," and I have a big asterisk on that. I have question marks surrounding that. So you definitely need to, fill the coffers behind him, and it's not going to be James Pierre, who, was kind of fortunate to have a spot and a role with this team. A lot of it because of his special teams play and because of his familiarity with having been with the Steelers. But that guy wasn't around all of training camp, all summer, most of the preseason, I believe. He was like a real late add because of the depth issues, because of the inexperience of a Corey Trice. So, and Trice getting dinged up. As you mentioned, we were talking about this, and I got duped into it too. It was like the announcers for that one game were like, well, this is his first game playing in the NFL, like real late in the season. And he had that pick earlier in the year, and I'd even forgotten about it. That's how unmemorable Corey Trice's career has been with the Steelers thus far. So you've got to hammer some of this out in free agency, though, because you can't just go into the draft and have 3 top priorities for needs. So if they go into it and they're thinking, well, we need a wide receiver and a corner, wide receiver does not look good in free agency or in the draft this year. There's not terrible. A lot of depth. It's not a good spot for the Steelers to be in.
It's not bad in the draft in the first 2 rounds.
Yes.
Once you get past that, then it's a weaker wide receiver class than I think we've seen in several years. First 2 rounds is where the target is, right? That's where you're going to make hay at wide receiver, if you're in fact going to make hay. But the free agent market, look, it's T. Higgins and that's it. You're done, right?
If he's even available.
If he's even a free agent, right.
Yeah.
If he's even there. What they can do, and what I'm still going to bang the drum for, is go get DK Metcalf. That's what I'm going to say.
I know we're not talking offense, but at this point, if you added Deebo Samuel, the only thing you can do is, you pick up another low-level veteran. We haven't gone through the list yet. We will soon. Like you did with Van Jefferson, and then draft somebody. And you're probably, like you said, you have to take that shot, and you better hope it's in, it'll be top 50 picks for the Steelers. I'm thinking the other pick, I got to find out what the other one was. It's 21, and then probably like 49 or 50 again, I think, for the second round.
I can't remember.
I've got it here. I'm going to see if I can find it. Well, there was the draft. I have the draft order. I don't have the actual picks. So, but okay, full order here. Let me see. This is kind of like 52. Close enough, right? So, top 50. Okay. Some other teams may have some other needs where they go away from wide receiver, but I don't know if it'll be that big. There's a lot. I mean, we're seeing it in the mock drafts already. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Chris Godwin's going to be a free agent. It's another guy I'm not sure I want to touch with a 40-foot stick because injury concerns, and they probably don't either. They've paid him enough money, and they also have Mike Evans, who's been ageless and has done he'll future Hall of Famer, right? How much time before Father Time catches up? So they pick ahead of the Steelers. So that's a concern when we start getting into mock drafts. But secondary's still there too. Slot corner, Cam Sutton, free agent. A lot of people down on him. I was always big on him. I even have my reservations going into the offseason if he's the guy you want to roll with. I get Mike Tomlin and his stubbornness to play younger players, but Beanie Bishop is a guy that made a lot of splash plays. Maybe he could be more than just serviceable there heading into year 2. So, but you're banking on a guy who was undrafted altogether with some limited playing time.
Beanie, he benefited from simply being in the right place at the right time a lot of times. But that's a gift if you can continue to do that. If you can have a career of being in the right place at the right time, you can have a pretty daggone good career. Here's the thing. When he wasn't in the right place at the right time, he was mostly in the wrong place.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I wasn't overall impressed with Beanie as a whole. He had his moments, but if you watched the overall expanse of his play, I'm not sure that's the answer.
It's the reason I'm bringing up position group coaches.
Yep.
Because again, communication, Minka not being Minka, it just whether it's Beanie, whether it's Sutton, there's problems. And where are those problems coaching? Ultimately, somebody's going to go all the way up to the top and say, Mike Tomlin, yeah, I'm going to hold him accountable too. Maybe this is the accountability. And kind of hard to fire guys. You got to go to war with what you got. It's like, well, we sent 2 tanks. We really needed 3, but it's overseas. We can't go get the other tank. We got to go to war with 2 tanks. This is the way it is. And if they exploit us, they exploit us. And that's kind of what happened. It's kind of when you're talking about like all the money that's spent on the defense, and it's like one of the higher paid or highest paid defenses in the NFL. You're looking at it, you're like, oh man, they don't have a quarterback, they need a wide receiver, and running back's unsettled, and it's the offensive line fixing. I was like, yeah, that's a whole other set of problems, but we cannot ignore what's over here and what happened, giving up 28 points per game in the last 5 games, all losses to close out the season. You could have Joe Burrow, and look what happened with Joe Burrow putting up Dan Marino numbers. You could have Joe Burrow and still not win those games.
Didn't make the playoffs.
That's right.
Had to struggle to even have a chance. Very much Joe Burrow had the Duck Hodges season, except their Duck Hodges was on the defensive side of the ball, and they couldn't make it there, right? Their whole defense was Duck Hodges.
Yeah, pretty much, man. I mean, I'll still say getting rid of Jesse Bates was not the right move for them. We'll see what they do with T. Higgins, but defensive line, I mean, secondary looks like it's a huge thing. Defensive line, you could add some bodies to this. There's no major free agents here. There's no major free agents. So Cam Hayward will be back. Larry Ogunjobi enters the final year of his contract.
Trade is the only way you're getting anything else. It's the same problem, right? The free agent market is terrible. I've been saying this since the beginning of the off season. Defensive line is an issue. And I think that Keanu is playing out of position more than not. He should be playing Cam's position. But Cam is still there and playing like a man possessed, right? They have to fix it. They're not getting what they need out of Larry O. I don't think Larry O is back, be honest with you. But they gotta get better on the defensive line.
Well, you mean beyond this year for Larry O, as I don't see them moving any further. Now, he would save $7 million as a cap hit if he were released. He's at 10.5. Only a 3.5 hit that could be swallowed if you believe there's anybody that's comparable and or better out there that you go out and get. We see Allen is on the trading block now, former All-Pro there from the Commanders, and somebody else. Oh, geez. I'm trying to think who it was. But you're right. There's nothing in real free agency. It's like pretty much everything is like a trade. Now, they were allowing him to maybe pursue one. Is that somebody that you would go after? I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. Isn't Chase Young floating around out there too? I believe.
But he's not. He doesn't fit into their role.
He's so past like he's a real reclamation project. You know what I mean?
He is. And he's an edge guy. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not a D-line guy.
It's a problem when you're talking like we were talking earlier. So yeah, Cowboys 4-3, Parsons defensive end. And he gets drawn up into conversation because he is an edge rusher, just like, Myles Garrett, but hand in the dirt versus standing up versus TJ Watt in a 3-4. I'm not trying to sound like the smartest guy in the room, but you got to point those things out sometimes that their body types are just different. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Some of these guys are maybe a little slimmer or a little, chunkier because they're maybe facing a certain, TJ might be just going up against a tackle and a tight end versus a guard and tackle. It's, there is some differences there. So
Absolutely.
the Steelers, having played this nickel stuff forever too, when you're talking about, you need like a Cam Hayward type that's like about 300 pounds, 305 or whatever, guys that could get down and that are a load, a chunk in a trunk. Now, Javon Hargrave, I think, is going to be floating around out there too, but San Francisco has said this is like a catch release and they're expecting to bring him back. Definitely somebody I'd bring back, but you can't, you can't be paying all of these guys. You can't be paying Cam, Larry, and then bringing in somebody else that, when you already have 2 starters penciled in and potentially a third one that's a younger guy. So as much as I would love to have him back, there's got to be maybe a corresponding roster move that's there. If you were to bring him back into the fold, I would. I think he's...
I would bring Jay Wobble back in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I mean, he could play every position on the line.
You could.
Yeah.
Right? The thing is, we were crushed when Jay Wobble was gone, right? The one thing we said that offseason, re-sign Javon Hargrave. Re-sign Javon Hargrave. And it didn't happen. And he's proved that we should have re-signed Javon Hargrave. Well, he's gone out. He's made cash. He's made bank. He's played very well in circumstances. He's also been injured. But
yeah,
I would have taken Javon Hargrave over Larry Ogunjobi.
Well, that wasn't the choice at the time. It was Stephon Tuitt was making a boatload of money. So I don't want to feed the trolls. Because when you're talking about the nickel and you're only playing 2 of the defensive linemen, you're playing them sometimes on the end as,
it's
if you do have a nose tackle, or if you're playing them as an actual tackle, you couldn't pay all 3 of them. It's
really
possible.
Easy to forget Stephon Tuitt because when he vanished, he really just vanished.
He vanished because he just quit football under the unfortunate circumstances, and he was making a hefty sum. He might have even been a top 5 salary. He was definitely top 10 on this team, and he was in a 10+ million range. So you can only pay so many guys double-digit millions over the years. They don't have a whole lot of free agents though on this defensive line. I think the only one of note is really Isaiah Loudermilk. And Montravius Adams is still under contract, more of a reserve guy. I believe Dean Lowry is also still there. So they don't have a whole lot of guys that are moving off here, but they're also not super exciting when it comes to when you're talking about, hey, defensive line underperformed last year. Some of that too, I think, is, scheme, coaching. And let's throw special teams in here real quick with the defense. Boswell ain't going nowhere. I wouldn't mind if they did something with Waitman. And he's bounced around enough. I should pay attention as to whether or not, I'm going to have to go back and look and see if he had a future reserve or he was eligible for something like that. But it was somebody I would at least bring back to camp, because you don't know if Cameron Johnston is going to be back to full form. He was another high-profile signing last year. It was a 3-year deal. Is one hell of a punter from everything I saw in camp. Gets hurt in the preseason pretty much and done. Was it preseason or was it week 1? Or was it just before week 1? He lasted a week, didn't he, Brian? Cameron Johnston. So I was really excited. It was like, hey, finally get somebody who could flip the field. And let's not forget with these kick return rules, should they stick? Cordero Patterson is not a guy that I'm looking to have back on this roster. I know that, he's a legendary kind of guy when it comes to being a kick returner or special teamer. And you throw him in the backfield, he's an Arthur Smith favorite. The dude has a $2.8 million cap savings this offseason. He's under $1 million lost to dead money. He's 34 years old. He looked 34 years old and slow.
Oh yeah, I don't think he's back yet.
It just didn't make, it's not going to make a lot of sense to me if he's back there. So they're going to have to look for probably just run-of-the-mill backup special team only type guys that are going to fill this role. I know Jaylen Warren has done it in the past some, but it's going to have to be a specialist. I know they had Jamal Agnew come in for during this season, and he never cracked the roster really, but it was like, oh, there's a return guy. Maybe that was with some future thoughts in mind. So with that in mind, March 10th is the target coming around the corner. Next week, we're going to talk about a lot of it is already who stays and who goes. So I'm going to have to cut this last part. I had a really bad hairball, dude.
Oh.
I couldn't get it over to you. Hold on one second.
I understand.
So next week, right before the advent of free agency, we're going to look at some of these lists, who are going to be some free agent targets, maybe some more who stays, who goes type of situations with the Steelers overall. Maybe we have a little bit more news on some transactions, but until then, it's still, like Omar Khan said in his interview, a lot of fake news, a lot of misinformation stuff out there. So be careful. Anyone signing with anybody, unless it's officially, go look at Steelers.com, wait for a release, because if it's somebody they're going to bring back, it's going to be there. There's a transaction wire right on their website. So I'll leave it at that. Brian, thanks once again for joining us. I know it's a short week, but not a whole lot of news to cover here.
Just not much going on, but hey, it's going to kick up here in a minute and a half, and it's going to hopefully be a wild couple weeks until we get to the draft.
I know, man. It's so crazy that football, like at least for us Steelers fans, has been over since January, and we're already through February. It's wild. It's moving at lightning pace here, and it's hard to believe that we're just like maybe around just a 14 days-ish or so away. I'm not pulling up the math graphic. I'm not doing all of it. Somebody else can figure it out. It's Wednesday. So we're here on a Wednesday. We're 2 weeks away for all intents and purposes. That's all I'm going to say. That's how I'm going to leave it. So till next time, folks. Well, it's a Wednesday and then it kicks over to, the 12th's on a Wednesday. See, my math was right. It's 2 weeks. I'm good. You're good. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Till next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.